Hi everyone, here's another art journaling video, and I'm going to be trying out my distress paints to create a background, and also some distress paints and distress stains with some clear embossing powder to create a funky frame. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I'm going to give it a go. It's something that I've been wanting to try, and I'm going to try it here on this art journal page. So I'm starting out by using my distress paints to create a background, and you recognise it straight away. I've got sky, I've got grass, and I've got clouds. I'm just using the daubers on the top of the paints to add the paint to the page, and then I'm just taking a wet brush and then I'm blending the colours together. And as you can see, I'm not trying to get too much detail here. I just want the hint of some grass and some sky with some fluffy clouds. And just a little tip, if you don't want too much paint in the applicator, as I'm doing here, I just want some sort of light fluffy clouds. So I'm using the plastic packaging that I've got by the side of my book just to release a little bit of the paint, because there's a little valve in the top of the distress paints, and that way I get a nice light paint effect. I don't want it to be too heavy. So you'll see me keep pressing onto the tray, and that's because I don't want to blot it directly onto my page and create a spot of paint. So that way I can release either the distress stains, which I'm using here, or the distress paints by pressing it onto my plastic tray. And as you can see now, I'm creating a bit of a stripy border, and I'm using a combination of distress paint and distress stain because I didn't have all of the colours yet in my distress paints range. Otherwise I would have probably just used paint throughout, but it's given me a couple of lessons, as you'll see as we go further along. So the pink and the purple are distress stain and the yellow is distress paint, and I'm just drying them off before I move on to the next step. Now I'm using a couple of masks, and I've got some Cosmic Shimmer clear embossing paste, and then I'm just spreading the embossing paste randomly through the mask, and I'm using the big polka dot mask to start with, and I'm taking off the excess if I get any on my actual picture. I just want to keep the resist to the frame. I decided it was better to let the first dots dry naturally, so I went away for a little while, and now I'm coming back to add in the places where I haven't got the big dots. I'm creating some small dots, and you can see I'm using my brand new stencil from Tim Holtz. I have only got this one at the moment, but I definitely have plans to get more. They're very nice. I like the size of them. They're quite handy for small projects. I do a lot of tags, and they'll be good for cards as well. I think you can see that that's all dried, and if I just lift it up to the camera, you can see the texture that I've got with the clear embossing paste. Using the sticky strips of the post-it notes just to mask off the area that I want to keep as my frame, and then I'm using distress stains to go over and change the frame to black. And as you can see, the resist that I put down earlier with the clear embossing paste is letting the coloured polka dots show through. Now you might notice that the areas where I had the distress stain, which was the pink and the purple, that's gone really nice and black. Now I'm adding the black soot distress stain on top of it, but it's not covering so well on the yellow. And I have a go with the distress paints after this, so I definitely would recommend doing this technique with distress stains and using the stains on top, or doing it with paint and using the black soot paint on top, and I think that way you get the best coverage. And then I'm just wiping off the excess with a baby wipe to reveal the spots underneath. I'm just getting myself a couple of book pages, and then I'm going to be using my trusty daisy punch to punch some flowers ready to grow on my art journal page, and I'm going to be cutting some stems and some freehand leaves. As you can see, I've cut some of the daisies in half, and I'm going to be trimming the stems to size as I go along, and I'm just cutting some leaves to go with them. And now I want some translucent colour on my book pages so I can still see the print. So I'm using the distress stain on the flowers, and then on the leaves and the stems I'm going to be using a light coat of the distress paint, and as you can see, distress paint is also quite translucent, so it's quite a nice effect if you're using book pages. I'm just having a little dry run of when my daisies are going to grow. I really like using book pages, I think it looks quite funky. And then I'm using the matte medium, and I'm just trimming a couple of my stems down, and I'm using the matte medium to put them in position on the page. And trimming my stems to size as I go. And you might think my daisies are looking a little bit of a strange shape, and you'd be right, but once you see the centres put into position, they'll make more sense. So I'm just going to be using a 1/2 inch circle punch and some bright yellow cardstock to match my yellow polka dots, and then I'm attaching them, the centres, to the daisies. And the ones that are a bit of a strange shape, I'm just trimming a little bit off of each of the dots, and you can see they make much more sense now. Next up, I'm using some scrap card, and I think you can tell that this, well, I hope you can tell, this isn't a shower, but the spout's of a watering can, and I'm going to cut it out of this pretty flowery paper. It looks a little bit odd at the minute, but once we get all the doodling done, it will look a bit more realistic, I hope. I'm just having a think about the words that I'm going to put on my journal page. Now, I really would like to try some of those gelatos that I see people using on their art journal pages to create shadows and depth on their designs. But at the moment I don't have any, so I'm going to be using, again, the black soot distress paint, and I'm just watering it down and using it on my brush and just trying to feed the shadow out. So the main thing is to try and stick to the same side of your design when you're putting the shadows in, and you'll get a better effect than if you switch from side to side. So pick where the light's coming from and then shadow on the other side. Now you must make sure before you start doodling with your black and white pens that everything is nice and dry, so all your inks and paints are dry, and all your glues in particular, otherwise you will spoil the nibs of your pen, and I've done that 1 or 2 times. And moving on to my leaves and stems. I think this is where your art journal page starts to really come to life. And I'm giving some definition to the petals on the flowers. And I'm just tracing around the die cuts and then adding a few marks to mark the centre of the daisy. And then it's time to make that strange shape look more like a watering can. At least that's what I hope I'm going to do. And as you can see, either my pen has just run out or I've just ruined it, so I'm just switching to another one. Next, I decided that I wasn't quite happy with how the edges of my frame were. I had a bit of leakage of ink, so I'm going to create a black and white stripe all the way round the frame just to neaten it up, and as it happens it's actually making it stand out quite nicely. So I quite like the black and white stripes that you see on people's art journals. It's quite an easy effect to achieve, and I'm just going along adding little black stripes. I'm not even colouring them in completely, and I'm just sort of scribble colouring them in, and then I'm going back with my white pen to fill in. I wanted to create some little highlights on my flowers, but it wasn't working with my pen, so I just took my paintbrush and some of the distress paints, and I'm using those instead. Now I've switched to my distress paint just to darken up that border, and it works a treat over the painted areas of the yellow. I was happy with how dark it was over the distress stain, but over the yellow it wasn't quite so dark, so I've picked that out again with some black soot distress paint. And then again, I just wanted my white a little bit brighter, so I'm using the paint rather than the pen to add the stripes to my border. Now I need a little rain to fall from my watering can, so I'm just freehand cutting some white card teardrop shapes. And again, I'm not too fussy, I just want them quite random. And you can always tell by the little change of my lighting that time's moved on a little bit, and I went and had some tea, and I'm back again to finish off my art journal page. So I'm just sticking the rain or the water from my watering can into position. And now it's time to add the words that I wrote earlier. I'm using some dotty alphabet stamps. I've used some mustard seed distress paint to colour some cardstock to match my design, and I'm just stamping two words that I want to draw attention to: imagination and creativity. And I actually stamped imagination twice because the first one I got a little bit of a hair on the stamp, and I've got plenty of cards, so I did it again. I've cut my two words into strips, and then I'm using them in the position that I want them, and then spacing out the rest of my quote. And then for my final word, I've used the distress stain this time to get the same colour pink as my flowers, and then I'm punching some 1/2-inch circles, and I'm going to stamp them with the word grow. Then a last little bit of doodling to highlight the main words of my little quote. So the words I've written to go with my art journal page are: a sprinkle of imagination helps your creativity grow. I'm just adding a little bit of a highlight to all of my water droplets. And I was planning to do a little bit of music and a little bit of chat, but I've ended up doing all chat and no music. I hope you don't mind, and I like to let you know what I'm doing, so that if you fancy giving any of the little techniques a go, you have the information that you need. And I'm dating and signing my work, as we all should, and I'm adding a little bit of sparkle to my water droplets with some distress glitter. It was right at this very moment that my camera beeped and stopped working because I'd filled up my memory card, so that was fortunate that I just got to the end of my page. So that's it, another page finished in my art journal, and I've had some great inky distress paint fun. I like that resist technique, and I'll definitely be giving that a go on more projects in the future. I hope that you've learned something, or that I've inspired you, if you don't already art journal, to look it up a bit more. There's plenty of videos out there to inspire you, and it really is a great way to play with all your stash. There's no right or wrong, you just go for it. If you have enjoyed my video, then I'd really like it if you'd hit subscribe or like, or just leave me a comment. And I'd like to say a great big thank you to everyone that has joined me so far. You definitely encouraged me to make lots more videos. Not that I need a huge amount of encouragement, because I really do enjoy it. I also share lots of inspiration over on my blog and in my Etsy shop. If you fancy popping along, the links are on this page. And I thought I'd finish this video by showing you a shot of a mess that I make when I make a video, and this was the aftermath of a tag that I made for Tim Holtz's 12 tags of 2013, and this is what it looks like when I start off. And I'd just like to say a great big thank you for joining me, and thank you for watching.